Let me say thank you very much to David for the kind introduction, and thank you all for the warm reception. It puts me in the mind of what one of America's greatest thespians would have said in response to the warm reception, and that is Sir Samuel Davis Jr. would have responded such that he said something similar to, as you know, it's really groovy when young cats like you dig a man. I was told to keep my speech and my session to about 20 minutes, so I'm going to take my watch off. And you know, as I take this watch off, it's interesting that it immediately fills my mind with memories of my mother. And as David mentioned to you, I teach entrepreneurship, specifically entrepreneurial finance. And this semester, I am continuing a new course that I've created titled Black Business Leaders and Entrepreneurship. And this watch puts me in the mind of my mother, who was the finest entrepreneur that I ever knew. And she was the finest entrepreneur I ever knew, and she would be proud that I would be speaking to you about the topic of black entrepreneurship. And let me tell you a little bit more about this watch and my mother. I remember when my mother was gravely ill and she was in the hospital. She called me into her hospital room, and she said, Steve, this watch has been in our family for 3 generations. And she was the finest entrepreneur that I ever knew. And she said to me, she said, you're the oldest of my children. And she said, I'd like to give you the chance to buy this watch from me. On a more serious note, it's truly an honor to have been invited here today to talk to you about the importance of entrepreneurship to the black community. In a single word, entrepreneurship has meant freedom for the black community. Before the Emancipation Proclamation in 1865, free blacks in the South and the North had an insatiable appetite for business ownership, such that on the eve of the Civil War, the black collective wealth in the United States was conservatively estimated to be over $50 million. For example, in the 1700s, James Fortin owned a manufacturing company in Philadelphia that made sails for ships. He employed more than 40 black workers. In 1838, free black women created for themselves and others through their domination of the dressmaking, the hat making, and the wig making industries. In 1840, free blacks in New York also created jobs through their ownership of 1 clothes cleaners, 1 hairdressing salon, 1 confectionery, 1 fruit store, 2 coal yards, 2 dry goods stores, 2 restaurants, 3 tailor shops, and 6 boarding houses. Surprisingly, entrepreneurship was not limited to free blacks. Slaves such as Frank McWhorter, John Barry Meacham, and Robert Renfro were allowed to own their own businesses. They were required to share the profits that they generated with their owners. They ultimately used their share of the profits to buy their freedom. John Barry Meacham owned a carpentry business. He purchased the freedom of himself and his family and 20 other friends with the profits. In 1794, Robert Renfro started a restaurant in Nashville, Tennessee. With the profits, he purchased his freedom 7 years later. And finally, Frank McWhorter, in the early 1800s, started a company that produced saltpeter, the main ingredient in gunpowder. With the company's profits, he purchased his freedom, his family's freedom, and 16 other friends associated with his family. Yes, my friends, we have always been business owners, and I applaud and celebrate those brave black men and women who used entrepreneurship literally as a tool for freedom. But before we leave the topic of the history of black entrepreneurship, I would like to make the point that black entrepreneurship, especially during the Jim Crow era, was not loved by everyone. In fact, one of the worst incidents of violence ever visited upon blacks was directly related to successful black entrepreneurship. This took place in Tulsa, Oklahoma on June 1st, 1921, and has been referred to as the Black Holocaust in America. In the roaring 20s, one of the most affluent black communities in America was not in New York, it was not in Chicago, but it was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which was also known as the Black Wall Street. 15,000 blacks resided in this city, and man, were they something special. In a 36 square block area, they owned and operated over 600 businesses. A dollar would circulate 36 to 1,000 times, sometimes taking a year to leave the black community. Today, unfortunately, a dollar leaves the black community in 15 minutes. The main thoroughfare of this 36 square block area was Greenwood Avenue, intersected by Archer and Pine. The first letter in each of these street names is G, A, and P, which spells Gap. And that's, my friend, where the Gap Band from Tulsa, Oklahoma got their names. These brilliant black businessmen and women owned 30 grocery stores, 21 restaurants, 6 private airplanes, 2 movie theaters, 1 hospital, 1 bank, and 1 bus system. Now, don't these facts just warm you with pride and admiration? Well, the pride and admiration that you, me, and those 15,000 black people had was equaled by the jealousy and disdain of the 3,000 Ku Klux Klansmen who resided in Tulsa. On June 1st, 1921, the Black Wall Street, in a period of 12 hours, was gone. The black citizens were awakened that day by airplanes flying low over their homes, such that homemade turpentine bombs could be dropped, instantly emblazing the houses. And when those black citizens fled their homes, they were greeted by machine gun fire from the Klansmen, most of whom were World War I veterans. By the end of the day, these Klansmen, most of whom were also respected citizens in the white community, these Klansmen had burned down all of the businesses and killed 300 black Americans. No white citizens were arrested. Amazingly, this type of incident was not unique to Tulsa. It happened in over 100 other black communities in America during the Jim Crow era. Now, these facts of terrorism against black Americans has had a devastating impact on black wealth creation. As one 90-year-old black woman said from Tulsa, Oklahoma, she said, "My husband and I own 10 buildings that house 10 of our businesses." She said, "Today, I own nothing. I rent." My friends, incidents like these, combined with 250 years of unpaid slavery, have left black Americans economically in 28 almost worse off than we were during slavery. For example, the Boston Globe did research and found that the average net worth of a white family in Boston is $247,000. The research showed that the net worth for a black family in Boston is $8. The black community desperately needs the government to help us because it was legal government public policy that is the foundation of this disparity. In addition, our country desperately needs more black entrepreneurs who can create significant wealth for themselves and others. In a book titled A Millionaire Next Door, the authors cite the fact that 80% of the country's wealthiest people gain their wealth through entrepreneurship, by either being an entrepreneur, investing in entrepreneurs, or working for an entrepreneurial firm. 20% of the balance of the wealthiest people in America gain their wealth the tough, old-fashioned way. They inherited it, okay? As Eugene Lang, the founder of the I Have a Dream Foundation, said, "There is absolutely nothing wrong with becoming rich as long as one enriches others along the way." And wealthy black entrepreneurs do just that. They enrich other minorities by giving them jobs. Yes, like all entrepreneurs, my friend, black entrepreneurs do good for society by doing well for themselves. There was an article by Clarence Page which magnifies the need for more black entrepreneurs and for black entrepreneurial firms that presently exist, for those firms to grow. Clarence Page cited the fact that in a recent study it was shown that black males in their 20s committed 4 violent crimes for every 1 crime committed by white males in the same age category. But when the study was controlled for employment, there was no significant differences in the crime rate. Who are the most likely employers of black males and other minorities? Black entrepreneurs. What we know is that the largest employer of blacks in America is the government. The second largest employer of blacks in America are black-owned companies, black entrepreneurs. There was research that showed that, like their ancestors, black entrepreneurs, regardless of their company's location, be their company located in the city or in the suburbs, black entrepreneurs create jobs for minorities. Dr. Timothy Bates did research, and what he showed was that white-owned companies located in minority communities have workforces that are 32% minority, while black-owned companies located in minority communities have workforces that are 85% minority. Then he moved the study out of the inner cities, and he found that white-owned companies located in white communities have workforces that are 15% minority. Conversely, black-owned companies in white communities have a workforce that is at least 75% minority. Obviously, these facts show that more black entrepreneurs and larger black-owned companies will help solve the problems of providing jobs for minorities. And it is indeed a problem. Even today, when unemployment is 4.1%, black unemployment is over 50% greater than that at 6.8%. And in major cities like Chicago, 60% of black males between the ages of 20 to 24 are unemployed. We need more black entrepreneurs, ladies and gentlemen. Simply placing companies in minority communities does not always create jobs for minorities. The company's ownership is just as important as the company's location. For example, in the Austin community in Chicago, on the west side of Chicago, the Austin community has a population of 100,000 people. During this time of low unemployment, 11% of the Austin community is unemployed. 23% receive food stamps, and 98% are minority. This same community has one of the densest populations of small manufacturing companies. These 4,000 companies located in the Austin community, which are primarily white-owned, they employ 90,000 people. Only 8% of those employees are minority. Now, it would be too simple to blame this entirely on racism. Instead, the reality is that a lot of this has to do with how people get jobs, especially in small companies. The way that they get jobs is primarily based on employee referrals by friends and family. The company's initial employees tend to come from the owner's same communities because that's who the entrepreneur knows. Therefore, that's who gets referred and hired for the new openings. The same phenomena surfaces with small women-owned companies where women employees are more prevalent. Therefore, let me repeat it. We need larger and more black-owned companies. This would benefit the black and the minority community and the country as a whole. America is strongest when all of its citizens are employed. In closing, what can you do to support black entrepreneurship? One, I encourage you to buy products and services from black-owned companies. Me, myself, I use the best and the brightest when I decide who to buy products from and where to get my services. And by the way, my law firm, therefore, in pursuing the best and the brightest, is a black-owned law firm. By the way, when I pursued the best and the brightest, my accounting firm is a firm owned by a black woman. In any city that I travel to, in America and throughout the world, I always try to find a black-owned restaurant so that I can find a way to put money in the black economy as soon as I set foot in that locale. Number two, I encourage institutions that you're associated with. I encourage you to encourage those institutions to use black professional service firms. That they should not just simply do the stereotypical thing and hire black people for security and hire black people in the food services industry that are the low-margin businesses, but hire black professional services firms. I serve on the board of trustees of my alma mater, Williams College, and I made this pitch that we should be looking for the best and the brightest to manage our money. And that best and the brightest includes black institutions. And in response to that, Williams College made the decision to give some of our money to two asset management firms that are black-owned. One is owned by a Harvard Business School alum, Paul Vieira, and the second is owned by John Rogers, REL Investments. I serve on the board of directors of SC Johnson Wax. We make Glade, Raid, and Windex. We do $9 billion a year. I say it the same to them, and that is we should be accessing and using the best and the brightest, and the best and the brightest includes black people. With that, we decided to hire Fairview Capital. Fairview Capital is a private equity fund of funds located in Connecticut with over $4 billion of assets under management, and the general partner is a brilliant black woman from Howard University by the name of Joanne Price. So I encourage you to take action relative to helping black people help themselves. By helping black people grow their businesses, that results in black people being hired, paying more taxes, and being a constructive part of America's society. And finally, in closing, for those of you in this room who are of African descent, all of us come from countries that were either colonized or put into slavery, except those from Ethiopia. But all of us come from countries where we were in bondage. If all of those of you in this room of African descent, I say to you, in 50 years, all of us will be gone. And when we're gone, we're going to get a chance to meet our slave ancestors. And those ancestors will ask us, what did you do for our people when you were free? And I'm hopeful that you'll be able to say, I supported black entrepreneurs who created jobs for black people because black people who have jobs are self-sufficient, and self-sufficient people lived in healthy communities. I was a part of the solution to the problem. Thank you all very much and have a great day. All right.